everyone, how's it going? Forrest here, again with another installment of my complete analysis of all of J.S. Bach's chorale harmonizations. Today we're looking at Was alle Weisheit in der Welt, which translates to the mystery hidden from the eyes. This is a very dense chorale. It looks like a lot on the page, but the first and second sections are somewhat repetitious. There isn't really, for all intents and purposes, if Bach wanted to, he could have put a repeat here, but he reharmonizes the melody, which is the same over these four measures here. If you can take a look at that on your own, but he reharmonizes it and repurposes the second part in A flat versus the beginning, which is in E flat, but other than that, they have the same cadential structure. So we're just going to hop right into the analysis. So two flats in the key signature. We start on B flat major. We end on C major. I think we're actually in the key of E flat major here. This is one case where the key signature doesn't accurately reflect the key of the chorale. And I think we start things off with the first two chords are actually quite ambiguous. This is either a 5 chord or a 3/6 chord, and I'm sticking with the 3/6 chord in that this F is an accented non-chord tone. I don't know if that's the more likely of the two, but I'm certain that the first two chords are a permutation of one of these two combinations. So after this B flat major or G minor over B flat chord, we have F, A flat, C, and A flat. That's F minor in root position, or I'm using the same scheme here where the note on the downbeat is an accented non-chord tone, D, F, A flat, and A flat, which would be a 7/6 chord. And then we get our E flat major, E flat, G, E flat, and B flat, which is our tonic triad. So it's some combination of these two chords together, 3-2-1, 3-7-1, 5-7-1, or 5-2-1. I don't know which one it actually is, but I'm confident that it's some permutation of these four chords, and it's honestly thrown me for a loop because either way you twist it, it is an unusual progression. It's definitely not normative, whichever way you spin the progression. But we are going to modulate to C minor at some point because our first cadence is in the key of C minor. We then have A flat major, A flat, E flat, and C, which is our 4 chord in the key of A flat. Passing tone in the alto. You might be wondering why this is not our chord tone. It very well could be. This, for the sake of continuity, could be a 2/6 chord. I just hear this as a 4 chord. That's just how I hear it. We then get G, E flat, G, and B flat, which is E flat major in first inversion, which is 1/6. Passing tone in the bass, passing 7th in the tenor, before we get E flat, C, G, and E flat. That's C minor in first inversion, which is 7/6, or in the key of C minor, it is 1/6, with a passing tone in the bass that brings us to G major, G, B, G, and D, which is our 5 chord, with an anticipation in the melody, and then we cadence on C minor, C, E flat, G, and C, which is our tonic triad in root position. So depending on how you look at the next phrase, we're either in the key of E flat major again before we move to the key of F minor, or we stay in C minor. I was first of the school of thought that we moved to the key of E flat because the melody moved from B flat to E flat, but I now think that this actually is just staying in the key of C minor, and we have a rare, but still something that we come across. We have a rare minor 5 chord, G, D, G, and B flat, and we're going to actually see why we see minor 5 chords in many cases in Bach, and that is because the third of the chord is typically sourced from the melody. If the melody had a B natural, it would be major, and that's typically the form of the 5 chord that we would expect in a minor chorale. All the 5 chords we've seen up until this point have been major in quality, in the minor key, that is, as well as the majority of 5 chords that we see in minor keys. In Bach, however, when we have a 5 chord contextualized with the supporting voices and the third of the chord is in the melody and it is not raised to be a leading tone, that's when we often get our minor 5 chords. However, the melody is very clearly E flat. B flat going to E flat feels like 5 going to 1 and an E flat major, and Bach is forcing a C minor perspective on it, and that's why we have the sound that we do. But then we have C, C, G, and E flat. That is C minor in root position, which is our tonic triad. Then we have B flat, D, G, and D. That might be another minor 5 chord in first inversion, but I think this is an accented non-chord tone. It's this E that's the interesting tone. I think this is E natural, G, B flat, and D, which is E minor 7 flat 5 over B flat. That would be 7, 4, 3 of 4, because F is our 4 and E is its leading tone, so 7 of 4. And that's what we get: A flat, F, A flat, and C, which is our 4 chord. F minor. We have a passing tone in the alto as well. Before we get, actually, I'm going to go ahead and say that that's where our modulation occurs. That makes sense that this is our not 1 chord, but 1/6 rather, because it is in first inversion. We then have D natural, F, F, and B flat. That's B flat major over D, which would be a major 4 chord in first inversion. And typically speaking, when we have a 4/6 chord connecting to the tonic in root position, which is our chord here, F, A flat, C, and A flat, which is our, like I said, our tonic, we have this leading tone connecting the 2 chords at minimum. In this case, we have a G to support it as well, which kind of gives us the 7 chord idea. We actually have a whole 7 chord here, E natural, G, and B flat, but this F here throws us for a loop because we don't have another B flat or another G to fully analyze this, or to allow us to analyze that there's a 7 chord here, but we know that it's being implied 4, 7, 1, but this F makes the chord a little interesting, unanalyzable, at least on the page. We also have a passing tone here in the tenor before this F is a chord tone, so we don't need to mark it, but it does create a 4/3 suspension over the bass here, C, C, F, and G. It's this E natural that is our chord tone, C, C, E natural, and G, which is our 5 chord, C major. And then our perfect authentic cadence concludes with F minor, F, A flat, C, and F. Okay, looking ahead to our next phrase, it's basically a repeat of the beginning of the chorale. However, I don't think that we are in the key of E flat, but rather we are in the key of A flat. So we have F, A flat, C, and F, which is now in the key of A flat, our 6 chord. Passing 7th in the bass and passing tones in the tenor and the melody before we get D flat, F, F, and A flat. That's D flat major, which is our 4 chord. Passing 7th in the bass. This A flat is a chord tone, so we don't need to mark it. We then have B flat, D flat, G, and B flat. That's G diminished over B flat, which is 7, 6. And then we have A flat major, A flat, E flat, A flat, and C, which is our tonic triad in root position. Then we have E flat major, E flat, G, and B flat, which is our 5 chord. We also have a passing 7th here in the melody, which is interesting, which makes me feel like this 5 is also functioning like 3 in the key of C minor. This F is also a passing tone. We then get C minor, C, G, C, and E flat, which is our tonic triad. 3 going to 1's a kind of unusual progression as well. We don't see it very often, but here we are seeing it. This is a chorale with a couple of interesting chord progressions in it, so this is one of them. We then have G, G, B, and D, which is our 5 chord again, similar to the cadence that we had here at the end of our first phrase. In anticipation in the melody as well before we get C minor, C, E flat, G, and C, which is our ending chord to our perfect authentic cadence. Looking ahead, we have another phrase. It's our counterpart to our second phrase here. We have G, D, G, and B flat, another one of these interesting cases where the B flat creates a minor 5 chord in the key of C minor. We're looking for a point on which we go to F, which I think happens over a similar device. We tonicize F, and that turns into our pivot chord that keeps us in the key of F minor. So we have C, C, G, and E flat, which is our tonic triad in root position. The C is a chord tone, so we don't need to mark it. We then get D, F, C, and D. I think this C is an accented non-chord tone, as well as this F, actually. I guess we could make the argument that this is kind of like a 2-7 chord, but it's missing the 5, and that's the most important tone in a 2 chord in a minor key, because that would be telling us if it were diminished or minor, and without it we don't know. So I think it's more likely that this D is also a chord tone. It's being doubled here, so I'm not going to mark it, but this E is actually going to be the root of our chord. We have E, G, B flat, and D, which would be E half diminished, or E minor 7 flat 5 of 4, similar to what we have here. It's a very similar progression, just a different texture, a different way of introducing the chord. We then have F, A flat, B flat, and C. This B flat's like a 4-3 suspension or some type of accented non-chord tone over the bass. It is our 4 chord though, F minor, because this A flat's our actual chord. And interestingly, with all of our F minor chords, we have doubled the A flat, which is interesting. Kind of strengthens the argument for this being a 2 chord of some sort. So maybe this is a 2 chord and this is a 5 chord, or this, I don't know, maybe this is more definitively a 2 chord, but I don't know, with a 1 chord on the other side, it just makes more sense to me that this is a diminished chord. But with every F minor we've had so far in this context, we've seen the A flat doubled, or we've seen a lot of A minors with A flat doubled. A lot of A flat doublings here. A flat, A flat, A flat, A flat, A flat, A flat. That doesn't seem coincidental to me, but this is where we're going to F minor. It is now our tonic in root position. We have D flat, B flat, G, and B flat. I think this E is also playing a role in the chord. This is another E minor 7 flat 5 chord in second inversion, 7-4-3, or it could be some type of 2 diminished chord as well. Yeah, this could be 2-6-4 as well, depending on how you look at it, but I'm going to call it a 7-4-3 chord because the E natural is there. We then have C, C, F, and A flat. That's F minor over C, or 1-6-4. Neighbor tone in the bass before we get C, B flat, E, and G. That is C7 in root position, which is a 5-7 chord. We could add that bracket because it's a habit from harmony class years and years ago. We have an anticipation in the melody here before our A section concludes with a perfect authentic cadence in the key of F minor, F, A flat, C, and F. And now we are moving into what I'm calling the B section. So first cadence in the B section, we have another perfect authentic cadence in the key of C minor. So starting things off, we have another F minor chord, F, A flat, C, and F, which I think is actually bringing us back to the key of E flat. It is now our 2 chord with a passing 7th in the bass and a passing tone in the tenor. That then takes us to D, F, F, and B flat, which is B flat major over D flat. That's a 5-6 chord. 2 going to 5 is a good sign. Passing tone in the bass before we get B flat, E flat, and B flat. I guess you could make the argument that this is a 1-6-4, but I think more likely this E flat's an accented non-chord tone, and this D is just meaning that we are taking the 5 chord and putting it in root position, so we'll just change the figured bass to reflect that. And then we get E flat major, E flat, B flat, E flat, G. This feels like the resolution the 5 chord wanted to go to, which is our tonic triad. We also have a passing tone in the alto before we get D, E flat, G, and C. This D is an accented non-chord tone for sure. This is C minor in root position, which is our 6 chord, and also our gateway back to the key of C minor. It's now our tonic. We then get G, D, G, and C. We know that this C is a 4-3 suspension over the bass with a neighbor tone in the tenor, but it's implying a 5 chord, and we get the resolution afterwards here in the melody before we cadence on C minor, C, E flat, G, and C, which is another perfect authentic cadence. Looking ahead, we have another perfect authentic cadence in the key of C minor. However, we go there through the key of B flat this time. So this C minor chord, similar to how our this phrase started by going from 1 to 2, the 1 chord being our pivot chord. We also have our 1 chord being a pivot chord, C, E flat, G, and C, but in the key of B flat, it is our 2. Rather than F being our 2 in the key of E flat, C minor is our 2 in the key of B flat. We also have a passing 7th in the bass, similarly to how this phrase began. We then have A, E flat, C, and F, another first inversion 5 chord. This is F7 over A, which is 5, 6, 5. And then we cadence on, I guess it is kind of a cadential progression, but we resolve to B flat major, B flat, B flat, D, B flat, D, B flat, and F, which is our tonic triad root position. We then have E flat major, E flat, B flat, and G, which is our 4 chord in the key of B flat. And I think this is where we go back to the key of C minor through our 3 chord. This isn't the first time, I believe. I think we have gone through a 3 chord as well. 5 turns into 3 here. In the key of C minor here we have 4 turning into 3, so it's not the first time. We have a passing 7th here in the tenor and a passing tone in the melody before we get A flat, C, A flat, and E. That is our 6 chord in the key of C minor. This is a transitive progression. 6 going to 3 is what we would expect, but here we have 3 going to 6. We have a passing 7th in the bass and a passing tone in the alto before we get F, D, A flat, and F, which is D diminished over F. That's 2, 6. Passing 7th in the tenor, passing tone in the alto before we get G, B, D, and D. This is a B natural, by the way. Sorry, that parentheses got in the way, but this is a 5 chord, B major. This E flat is an embellishing tone, as well as this F, which is a 7th, and then we cadence on C minor, C, G, E flat, and C, which is our tonic triad in root position. Looking ahead, we have our first non-authentic cadence in this chorale. It's a half cadence in the key of F minor, so we're looking for a point on which we modulate, but unlike the previous phrases, we stay in the key of C minor until we move to F. Similarly to how we had it in the A section. Now, something that I want to point out here is look how we have this 1-5-1 progression staying in C minor. In the A section, it was 1 minor 5-1. Here it is 1 major 5-1, G, B natural, G, and D, going to C, C, G, and E flat. And my hypothesis is that when the B is in Bach's control, he will typically make it a major chord. When the, when the third of the chord is in Bach's control in a minor chorale or a minor key, he will typically make it major, but when he is borrowing a melody, which he does from my understanding, all of the chorales, he's harmonizing melodies that just exist from the Lutheran tradition or are just in circulation from his time period or before his time. If the third of the 5 chord is in the melody and it's in a minor key, it's not guaranteed to be a 5 chord like here. Here we have a cadential leading tone, but in the beginning or in the middle of the phrase, there's no guarantee. So when Bach has control of the context, he'll make it major in most cases. When Bach doesn't have control over the context, it'll be minor in most cases. So I think that's an interesting observation, seeing as we're seeing both sides of the coin in the same chorale, which is interesting. But yes, after our C minor chord, we have passing 7th in the tenor before we get F, A flat, F, and D, which is D diminished over F, which is 2, 6. Passing tones in the lower voices before we get A flat, C, E flat, and C, which is A flat major in root position. That is a 6 chord in the key of C minor. And I think in the same way that we moved to C minor in the previous phrase, I think in the key of F minor, this is our 3 chord. So 2 similar functioning chords here, 4 and 6, both turning into 3s respectively, which is ultimately why I decided that that's where the modulation occurred. I feel like there is definitely symmetry and connection between these phrases. It's just not always necessarily the same chord that's doing it, but there is definitely connectivity between these phrases. We then have G, E, G, and B flat, which would be E diminished in first inversion, or 7-6. We have some passing tones in the lower voices before we get E, B flat, E, G, C, and E, which is C major over E, which is 5-6. 7 going to 5 is always an interesting progression for me because it's not really a progression. It's more just a series of chords that share a function, and when they share a function, it's sort of like prolonging the same idea that was introduced by the 7 chords. So it's not really a progression. It's not really introducing a new idea. It's really just adding C into the mix rather than B flat. But other than that, yeah, it's kind of an interesting progression, just like how there's the possibility that at the beginning of the chorale we have 5 going to 7. But we actually do have B flat here, but the C is still present, so it's just functioning as a passing 7th here. We then get F minor, F, C, F, and A flat, which is our tonic triad, and then we cadence on C major, C, G, E natural, and C, which is our 5 chord, concluding our first phrase that does not end with an authentic cadence. Okay, looking ahead, we have another phrase that concludes in the key of F minor. This time it ends in a perfect authentic cadence, and this is the only phrase that doesn't have any modulation throughout. It stays in F minor throughout the whole thing. So we have F, A flat, C, and F, which is F minor in root position. That's our tonic triad, passing 7th in the bass, passing tones in the melody and the tenor. Before we get D flat, F, F, and A flat, that is our 6th chord in the key of F minor, D flat major, passing 7th in the bass. We've actually seen this before. This phrase is almost identical to, or this measure is almost identical to this measure right here, and it is because of this interesting profile in the tenor. We have this arpeggiation of D flat major triad going on in the tenor, and I went up and I'm like, oh yeah, that's actually very similar to what's going on in this melody, so I anticipate the chord progression might be very similar as well. But in this case we're in the key of A flat, not in the key of F minor, so we're going to see similar chords like we do here. We have F minor going to D flat. In this case we're staying in F minor because that's just what it sounds like to me. But yes, we have B flat, D, G, and B flat in the key of F minor. That is a 2 chord. 2, 6 more specifically. 6 going to 2 is a good it's a good sign because 6 wants to go to 2, typically speaking, in diatonic progressions. We then have A flat, C, G, and C. I think I guess literally what's happening here is A flat major in root position. That's a 3/7 chord. Or A flat 7 without the 3rd of the chord. There's no E flat in here. We actually get E natural here, and it really kind of feels like we have like this C should be this A flat and this F right here. There might be an argument to be made that this is a tonic triad in first inversion, where 2 going to 1 would be actually kind of an interesting thing, but no, I think it's difficult to say. This really feels like an interesting chord, because if we take an aggregate of all of the notes that are happening, including the notes on the off beat, E, B flat, C, and A flat, we kind of have this idea of A flat augmented, C7 happening as well, but really there's just a muddying of chords here. But yeah, I'm going to stick with the 3 chord and just say that this is about of maybe a deceptive progression, maybe just some adjacent harmony where 2 is just taking us to a place beyond or prolonging the idea of introducing the dominant, which it does not immediately do, kind of like a turnaround. And it ends up turning around to a place we would expect. We have D flat carrying over from the first beat, D flat again, F and A flat, which is D flat major. That is our 6th chord. So 3 going to 6, that's a good sign. Normative progression, just like 6 going to 2. Passing 7th in the bass, and then we have B flat, D flat, G, and B flat. That's G diminished over B flat, or 2/6. So yeah, we're seeing like a cyclical progression here: 6-2-3, 6-2, and then in this case, because we're preparing for the cadence, we would expect 5, but we have some passing tones first in the upper voices before we get C, G, E natural. I covered the natural sign again with my parentheses. Apologies. But yeah, this is a C major chord, which is our 5 chord. And in a similar fashion, we saw this before, I feel. These 16th notes, like right here, there's like symmetry between these 2 phrases, maybe, who knows. But this cadence right here in the 6th phrase, is that right? Yeah, the 6th phrase, we see a very similar cadence with what's going on in the tenor here. It's almost like a copy-paste of what's going on here. It's like a transposition of what's going on. Actually, that's very interesting. If we take the melodies doing the same thing, the tenor and the alto switch places. So this cadence is actually, if you take the voices and flip them around, they're all achieving the same thing, just registrally they're different. But yes, this A flat is a non-chord tone, this B is a 7th, or B flat, and then we cadence on F minor, F, A flat, C, and F, which is our tonic in root position. For our last phrase, we end with a perfect authentic cadence in the key of C, but I believe we go through B flat major, which is interesting, and the big reason why is because we have this very interesting cross relation going on here. We have A natural versus A flat, and these are actually a lot closer than you think. This A flat is actually a half step below this A natural. The tenor's actually singing below the bass here, and Bach crosses voices all the time, more specifically in the upper voices or in the inner voices, but definitely the melody and the alto sing the same note or cross voices all the time. But here it's a very distinctive change and it feels like a separate idea, so I'm going to call it a direct modulation, but you could analyze it as a common chord modulation as well. I just think it's a little less likely just because it feels much more starker than like a blend. Sometimes Bach does blend keys using secondary dominants. I mean, case in point here, right? It's like the secondary dominant gets introduced and I suggest the modulation happens afterwards. But here, because it's a new idea, because of where it's happening metrically and thematically, it feels like a new idea. So I think it's a direct modulation. And this is an F major chord over A, which would be 5/6 in the key of B flat. And then we go to B flat, D, B flat, and F, which is our tonic triad. Passing tones in the lower voices before we get D, F, B flat, and F, which is our tonic triad in first inversion. No need to reiterate the Roman numeral. This B flat and this D actually turn the chord to root position, so we'll just change the figure based on the offbeat here before we get C minor, E flat major, E flat, B flat, and G, which is our 4 chord, and also in the key of C minor, our 3 chord. And if I'm not mistaken, this is how we went to C minor as well at the beginning of the B section. In the second phrase of the B section, we go to C minor here, we cadence, and then we go to B flat major, and then instead of going over a 2 chord here, we're going over F, which would be a 5 chord, I guess, technically in the key of B flat, but I'm calling it a direct modulation. But after all is said and done, we modulate from a 4 turning into a 3. So there's definitely symmetry going on, and the bass is doing the same thing as well. There's the same motion of E flat going to A flat here, and that's going to take our chorale out. So A flat, C, C, and F, that's F minor in first inversion, which is 4/6, some adjacent harmony. This F is a chord tone, so we don't need to mark it. We then have E flat, C, G, and E flat, which is our G, C, G, and E flat, which is our tonic triad in second inversion. Neighbor tone in the bass, G, B, G, and D, that is our 5 chord. Go ahead and put a bracket there. We're seeing a very similar cadence to how we ended our A section, but in this case we're in the key of C minor. They're very similar to one another. And then we cadence, after this delayed 7th, we cadence on C major, C, G, E, and C. And Bach often ends his minor chorales with major chords. In fact, the majority of the time he does. I'm sure he's not done it on a handful of occasions, but the vast majority of the time he does. And I imagine that's because he wants to end on a more uplifting note. But on that note, I'm going to wrap up today's analysis. This chorale had a lot of modulation. This chorale had a lot of harmonic activity, and it's really interesting to see a chorale written without a repeat that actually has a very starkly different harmonization of the previous melodic fragment. I'm talking about the A section in this case, but there's definitely some ambiguity in regards to where the chorale is modulating, what chord progression is going on at the beginning. There are some things that are not entirely clear, but this chorale is a gem just because of everything that's going on and how many modulations are occurring. It really feels like there is like a loose symmetry and that there are connections between the phrases, and there is some recycling of material here, which is really interesting. So looking deeper at the form would be an interesting next step. but there's this was one of the more jam-packed, lesson-filled chorales that I've looked at, in proportion to the length of the chorale, which is not super long for all of the lessons and all of the harmonic work that Bach put into this one. But on that note, if you're interested in following me along on the journey to analyze all of Bach's chorale harmonizations, feel free to subscribe to the channel. Feel free to hit the notification icon so you get notified of when my daily video goes live. This is episode 211 or 212. I have lost count at this point, but the description will tell you how many episodes I've recorded up until this point. I'm almost halfway there, so there's still more than 200 chorales to analyze, and I'm really excited for that analysis. So on that note, thank you so much for watching the video. Thank you so much for supporting the channel by doing so. I look forward to tomorrow's analysis, and I hope you take care.